to Joe.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I see many faces that I recognize. Hopefully those of you who have already heard a version of this particular presentation or will in the future won't be too terribly bored. I am aware as well that we are an international group. It's not just Suffolk, it's not just England, it's we have people from all over. I hope that you are all enjoying the pandemic as much as I am. I'm not really enjoying it at all. This is the worst apocalypse I've ever been in.
Sorry, Joe, can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
I forgot to mute everybody, so I'm just going to mute everybody. I think you remain unmuted. Is that? I think that's right, isn't it?
Probably, and if not, I took care of it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So, anyway, this last year obviously has not turned out quite as I expected. For those of you who don't know me or don't know about what I do, I run a publishing company called Take Control Books. Take Control Books started as an offshoot of Tidbits. So Adam and Tanya Angst, who have been running Tidbits, the newsletter and website since 1990. 1990, I mean, imagine that. They started an ebook publishing business back in 2003. I was one of their first, I was the first author to have a book published, and have written more of the Take Control series than anybody else has, although we've had more than a dozen authors. And that was sort of my main job for quite some time. And then in 2017, Adam and Tanya decided that they wanted to get out of the ebook publishing business and asked me if I'd like to buy it from them. And I said, well, that's a really weird thing, an author buying their own publisher. Sure, let's do that. So I did that, and I therefore became publisher as well as author. It's been a little bit rough because being publisher is itself a full-time job. Being an author was a full-time job, and I've had some other, stuff to deal with. So some of my own books that I have intended to update to new editions for quite some time have kind of fallen behind. I'm working on it, and as hopefully maybe the pandemic starts to wind down a little bit, there is discussion about maybe some month in the near future, our kids might go back to school in person for part of the day. That would really help a lot. As stuff changes, hopefully the pace of updates and new releases will accelerate. And also I'll be able to deal with some bugs and outstanding issues. Before many of you joined, Mike and a few other people who were with us at that time were having a discussion about how the company that we use for payment processing, FastSpring, still inexplicably charges VAT to folks in the UK on ebooks, even though, as we all know, that's not required anymore. They charge it, they go ahead and pay that to the UK government, even though they shouldn't be. It is a real sore spot with me. I am not happy about this. I have made my unhappiness known to FastSpring. They've been not very responsive. I'm going to give you a discount on our books that hopefully will make up for that and a little bit more. If it still bugs you philosophically, you can go buy our books at Amazon or Apple Books or whatever, although I really wish you'd buy them from us, because that way our authors will get more money, because folks like Amazon especially take a large amount off the top. Anyway, we're not here to complain about payment processors and taxes. Taxes, of course, are one of those things that you can't get away from in life. And the other thing that you can't get away from is death. So we're here to talk about death, but I hope and believe that this will be the most enjoyable and fun presentation on death that you have experienced all month, maybe all year. Let's get on to it. I'm going to share my screen now. And if the technology gods are smiling upon us, You should see a little, I gotta get things arranged here. Great. You should see a Keynote slide that says take control of your digital legacy.
Yeah.
So I have been writing books about the Mac and other technological topics since 1996. And I have been doing user group meetings since more or less that same time. I have done hundreds. I have lost count of how many. I have been to user groups all over the United States and in a few other places. Mike was asking me before if this is my first presentation in the UK, and I honestly can't remember. It's certainly my first in Suffolk, but I don't know if I've been in the UK before virtually. However, what I have noticed over 20 some years of doing user group presentations is that the average age has gone up and up and up and up and up. As I look out at your video thumbnails or your avatars, I see a lot of gray hairs. Most are even, grayer than mine. This is sort of the typical demographic of Apple user groups all over the world. And so when I go and I give a presentation on a topic like, backing up your Mac or dealing with your passwords, I would find that at the end of the presentation, somebody would come up to me. This was back when we were doing this in person, remember? Somebody would come up to me and say, well, Joe, that's very nice, but I'm 85 now and I won't be living forever. What I want to know is, what do I tell my kids or my wife about dealing with my backups? How do I make sure that the right people who are not me have access to my passwords after I'm gone? Stuff like that. And I kept getting these questions, and I realized, well, I don't know. I don't know what the story is for when you're gone. I better figure it out. So I figured it out and I wrote a book about it. And that's the book we're going to talk about today. It is, in fact, this book here, Take Control of Your Digital Legacy. Now, this book is nearly 6 years old at this point. It is due for a new edition. That will happen, as I mentioned, as soon as I can get around to it. But, not that much has really changed. There's some new information I would certainly like to put in it, but not that much has really changed in terms of death and what you should do about it, which is basically get your stuff in order. So I think you'll still find it very, very helpful. And of course, we treat our books in the Take Control world like software, or at least like software used to be treated. So minor updates are free. Major new editions, we give you a discount. And if you bought the last version of the book fairly recently, last few months before a major update, we'll give it to you for free. So chances are excellent that if you were to buy this book now, you would get the new edition for free when it comes out. Now it's normally $15 or pounds. I don't know, the shopping cart will figure it out in real time when you get there. There is the VAT thing, which I apologize about, but you can save 30% with that coupon code there, which you will see again at the end of this presentation. So that should more than make up for the taxes. In addition to the ebook, which is available in PDF and EPUB and MobiPocket format, so you can read it on pretty much any device you would like, you will also get a downloadable template for your digital will, which is something I will talk about in the next stretch of time. And I think that'll be very handy for you, and hope you'll take advantage of it. Even though I'm going to tell you as much as I can about this topic in the time we have together, our time is limited, and there's no way I can possibly get all the details in the book to you verbally. There are a lot of things that I'll say, but I say more about that in the book just because, time is short. So I hope that you will actually buy it and take advantage of it. And as I said, if you have a philosophical opposition to paying unneeded taxes, you can buy it from Amazon or Apple Books or whatever, but I hope you'll consider buying it from us. All right, here we go. I saw this this billboard on Google Images or something, and I thought, well, that's just beautiful. There was in fact a moment in my life when I could have used that, when that sentiment would have exactly described my feelings about what I would leave behind and to whom. Um, I uh, I come from a family that, at least on my father's side, had really no interest in genealogy or even in really telling stories about the past. It's a little bit weird to me, but anyway, there was just very little interest in keeping track of what had happened in generations previously. My grandfather, my father's father, died a few months before I was born, so I never met him. I've seen a handful of photographs. I've never seen a movie of him. I've never heard a recording of his voice. Um, I've heard very few stories about him. So I know approximately what he looked like, but I don't know what he was like. I don't know if he was a stern man or jovial. Was he kind? Was he funny? Was he interesting? Was he smart? I don't know. I don't know anything about him. And there's really no way for me to ever find out. His father, my great grandfather, I know basically his name and where and when he died and precious little else. I'm not sure what what his first language was. I don't know in what city or even for sure what country he was born. I mean, there's just no data on this guy, let alone what, what was he like? So when I compare what little I know about my family just 2 generations ago and what I have available to leave to my kids and their kids, the difference can't be more stark. I mean, I'm standing in front of my iMac Pro here. I've got a couple million files on it, and among those are tens of thousands of photographs, hundreds of hours of audio and video recordings of me, hundreds of thousands of email messages, letters that I've written, stuff that I've created going back, not to mention, thousands of pages of books, all the books I've written going back decades. So my kids and grandkids and great grandkids and anybody in the future who might care to know won't have to wonder what kind of a person I was, or what my favorite color was, or could I sing, or what does it sound like when I sneeze, or like, they won't have to wonder these things. They can get evidence. They can find out what my opinions were and where I went at various points in my life and what I bought. All that stuff is going to be available to them, but not automatically. And it's that not automatically part, that little asterisk, that is kind of the whole reason for this topic. Just because I have that stuff available now doesn't guarantee that it'll be available in future generations. So what I'm here to tell you is that while you are still alive and healthy and have your wits about you, you get to make decisions about what's going to happen to all your digital stuff in the future. All those photographs and email messages and other stuff that you have, Facebook posts, whatever, all of your digital stuff, you can decide, I want to enshrine this all for eternity, or I want to delete massive parts of it, or I want to leave some of it to this person and some of it to that person. You can make these decisions and you can put the structures in place to make sure that happens, or at least to give it the greatest possible chance of happening. But you have to take action now, or it's guaranteed that the people that survive you will do the wrong thing. So Obviously, that whole long-term legacy thing is a part of this. I personally, I mean, I know that I have children. I don't know that I will have grandchildren or great-grandchildren or whatever. Odds are I probably will. I don't know if any of those people in future generations will care about me. I'm not, you know, I'm not going to be a major historical figure. Nobody's going to put a statue of me in the park. I'm not going to be written about in history books, but you know, a few people might care. So for the benefit of anyone who might care or might think I had something interesting to say or something interesting to contribute, I do want information about me to persist for decades, if not centuries in the future. But there's another aspect. When you die, even if it is from a long illness and everybody was expecting it, in that immediate first few days, week, in that aftermath, your loved ones are going to be under a lot of stress. People are going to be asking them to make a lot of decisions. They'll need to answer a lot of questions. They'll have to deal with things like paying bills and dealing with insurance policies and dealing with bank accounts. And there will be legal considerations that will come up, and somebody's going to have to write an obituary for you. All these, to say nothing of, you know, funeral arrangements. This is going to be a difficult time period, even if someone thinks they're prepared for it. You can help them out by making the exact information they're going to need readily available to them. But even though we're mainly talking about death here, I wanted to step back even further and say, someday we will all be able to go on holidays again. We will all be able to travel. We will all be able to say, I think I would like to spend a month in Bali or whatever it is. We will be able to do stuff. And apart from voluntary vacationing, there's also, you know, you might get sick or injured and be in hospital for whatever, a couple of weeks, a month, could happen. And even during those times of being temporarily away from home and business, the kinds of planning we're going to do for your digital legacy can also help your spouse, kids, whoever, a house sitter, you know, a relative, take care of stuff temporarily while you're still alive, and then you'll get back to it later. So we're trying to deal with all three of these things at once. Now, as I said, the mere fact that I've got files on my Mac, well, not only this Mac, but that Mac and my iPad and my iPhone, and I have a lot of things. The fact that these documents and photos and things are there isn't all you need. One of the issues is encryption. I am a big fan of encryption. Of course, I use File Vault on all of my Macs. I use various forms of network encryption and file encryption and encrypted messaging. And of course, I protect all this stuff with strong random passwords that I store in my password manager. I really believe in doing this because I have seen so many cases of hackers doing really bad things, and not just like, you know, criminals. You know, from time to time, it does occur that a government or a government agency or a police organization does something that you maybe wouldn't like them to do. So really important to use encryption and good passwords to protect your privacy now. Problem is that cuts both ways. The very same protections you can put in place now could come back to bite you. You may have heard the story, a couple of stories actually, about people who had a lot of money in Bitcoin. And one guy forgot his password, so he couldn't get at all these millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. Another guy died, and the only password to unlock his Bitcoin fortune was in his head. He didn't write it down. He didn't leave it to anybody. That's a problem that you should not have to have, and we can avoid that. Now, were I standing in front of a room where I could see everybody raise their hands, I would ask for a show of hands. In this format, it's a little bit more awkward, so I won't ask you to do that even virtually, but I'm just going to say, does anybody here used to use AppleWorks or ClarisWorks? Anybody perhaps feel a little bit bitter that those went away and without a suitable replacement? See, somebody's raised their hand. So yeah, I get that a lot. With AppleWorks / ClarisWorks, not only can you obviously not run the software anymore, not only was there no direct successor to them, but also even if you just want like some app that will convert the file formats to something more modern, those conversion apps are increasingly hard to come by. I use that as an example when I'm talking to predominantly Apple user groups, because I know that it hits a nerve. File formats come and go. Now, you might think that, well, everybody in the world uses JPEG and .doc and .pdf and whatever, and a lot of people do for sure. But no file format is immune from disappearing at some point. So that is a thing you have to consider when you have data that you want people to be able to read far in the future. Now, apart from the data, there's the media on which it is stored and the devices that you use with them. So let's say you are up in your attic or wherever and you find an old dusty 1984 original Mac. That's great. It's probably worth a lot of money. Will it actually turn on? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Oh, there's a stack of floppy disks. Will those floppy disks still be readable after all these years? Time, heat, humidity, dryness, cold, like cosmic rays, like just ordinary atmospheric conditions can cause all kinds of media to degrade. So the fact that the device is still there in the future and the media is still there doesn't necessarily mean that it will be readable or useful. Now, if somebody just said, well, here's a floppy disk, or a zip drive, or a zip disk, or some jazz, or any some sort of old tape format or whatever, no guarantee that I would be able to find even today a compatible reader that will hook up to one of my modern Macs. I've got 3 Macs within a meter of me that do not have optical drives at all. I haven't had a floppy drive in the house in, I can't even remember how many years. So if you consider that's how things are now, imagine how they'll be 50 years from now. It's going to be really, really hard to read media that we have today. Then we come to, remember I said I have like 2 million files on my Mac. Well, Apple wants everybody to believe that it just doesn't matter where you put your files. Hey, just throw everything in your documents folder. It doesn't matter if you use subfolders. It doesn't, I mean, you can use tags, but you don't have to. And you can create a hierarchy, but you don't have to. It does, none of that matters because we have Spotlight, and Spotlight is terrific. You just type in something that's in that file and boom, it will magically appear. No problem finding stuff. Well, for one thing, that's pretty funny because anyone who has ever used Spotlight has probably found it's not all it's cracked up to be, right? It isn't all that accurate very much of the time. But even if it were functioning totally perfectly, there's still a problem. And that is, you as the person who has your own computer, iPad, iPhone, whatever, you know what you have. Other people, your spouse, kids, whatever, don't know what you have. So searching by the name of a file or something that's in the file won't be helpful. I like to say, imagine that unbeknownst to my family, in my spare time, I wrote the great American novel. Oh boy, it's fantastic. This is going to be the greatest thing ever. Unfortunately, even though I finished it, I died before it got published. Now, because my family doesn't know that I wrote the world's most amazing novel, they won't know to look for it on my computer and try to get it published posthumously. They don't know the name of the file. They don't know where it is. They don't know the names of any of the characters or anything in the file. So as much as my kids love me, I am pretty sure that they're not going to sit down in front of one of my computers and go through millions of files after I'm gone, just hoping to find some random nugget of brilliance. They won't know what I have unless I tell them. So, not saying that you have to do some elaborate reorganization of your files, but I am saying that you have to figure out what stuff you have that's important and interesting, might be important and interesting to people in the future, and make a note of it. So speaking of making notes, I would like you to create an inventory. Now, I don't mean that you should list every single file on your computer. That's ridiculous. Life is way too short. What we are looking for is big categories and highlighting the things that are most interesting, useful, and important. So to do this, you will create a digital will. Now, as I said, there's a template that you can download if you get the book that you can just fill out. I mean, you can make this up on your own, but you can fill out a template that will make things a lot easier. I am obligated to say that the rules, the legalities surrounding wills, and specifically surrounding a digital will, vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. What is true in Florida might not be true in England. So I'm going to make some general suggestions here. What I can't guarantee is that what I describe here will have the force of law unless you go through any additional procedures that are required in your local jurisdiction. Check with a legal professional. All right, so I'm going to suggest that you make an informal document. This is going to express your wishes, and under most circumstances, that should be enough. Your informal wishes should be observed. If you're concerned about them not being observed and you want to officially incorporate this into your regular will, or you want to, certify, notarize, whatever, make sure this has the force of law, you will need to check with a local legal professional to make sure that that happens. All right. So your digital will, among other things, will include an inventory of your digital assets. As I said, we are just looking at broad categories. One of those categories is going to be your online accounts. That could be your, anything dealing with money, bank accounts, PayPal, things of that sort. Certainly social media, online storage, backups, things of that sort, the accounts that are most interesting and useful. Media, by which in this particular instance, I'm referring to both physical media, you've got some old CD-ROMs or whatever, backup drives, but also purchased television shows, movies, books, apps, things of that sort, things, music, okay, things that you have purchased and downloaded. Some of those might need to be disposed of in particular ways, so make a note of those. Software is a special case. It does not do you or anyone else any good to say, well, I have a copy of TextEdit, and I have a copy of Photos, and I have a copy of Microsoft Word. Not worth your time to mention those things. Common apps that come with your Mac or that most people in the world have, don't even bother with them. What we care about here is apps that people will need after you're gone in order to be able to read those files that you're leaving for them. So if you have some unusual software that you use to store whatever kind of data, you want to make a note of that. And if you have any expensive apps that you want to leave the license for to someone else, make note of those as well. There's this other sort of catch-all category, which we'll come back to in a bit. Unfortunately, I don't have a better word for it than other, but it's really the most important category. This is all of your email that, you know, your saved, stored archives of email. It's all of your photographs. It's all of your letters, anything that you have created, anything that is unique on your devices. This big other category is actually the most important, even though it's sort of miscellaneous. And so you'll want to list the important subcategories and any particularly interesting individual files in your inventory. Again, the book goes into more detail about exactly what you list, and the template provides an easy place to fill that in. All right, so you've made your inventory. The next step is to make some high-level decisions that are going to inform the whole rest of the process. I should interject here. When I'm talking about this process of figuring out what all digital data you have, what you want to do with it, what you want to put in your digital will, unfortunately, this is not an afternoon's work. This is something that could take you weeks. It could take you months. You get to decide, of course, how detailed you want to make this, and you know, how urgent it is for you to spend a lot of time on this. Maybe it's something you spend an hour on every Sunday morning for a couple of years. Maybe you say, I'm just going to get this done and I'm going to block out a week of time and do the whole thing. But it is a process that you will have to go through. So first decision you want to make is, in general, what sorts of stuff do you want to make sure you preserve, and what sorts of stuff do you want to get rid of? I've had people come to me when I've done a presentation on this topic and say, no, I have some files on my computer that I would just as soon my wife and kids not ever know about. And I'm not here to judge. Okay, then you're going to want to take some steps to make sure that that those disappear. I have had people say, you know, when I'm gone, anything I ever wrote on Twitter or Facebook should really be nuked from space. I don't want anybody to ever see that again. Okay, that's your decision. If there are some things that you really want to not be preserved, you better make sure that you figure out what those things are now and come up with a plan to get rid of them. It may also be the case that amongst the many files you have, there's just a lot of junk. Maybe you're a digital pack rat and you save everything, but you know, it's hard to separate the noise from the signal if there's so much noise. So you might want to say, well, of these hundreds of thousands of email messages, honestly, it's only these 100 that anybody are going to really care about, and the rest can just be deleted. But you have to come up with some sort of rules for yourself for what kinds of things you want to keep and what you don't. Possibly the most important decision you will make is who will be your digital executor. Of course, your conventional will is going to have a designated executor. This is the person that is responsible for carrying out the wishes enumerated in your will. Obviously, there will be some constraints. You know, taxes have to be paid and bills have to be paid and, you know, whatever. But when all is said and done, within the, you know, within what the law permits and within the means available to them, They want to say, well, okay, this person is supposed to get your house. Now that person has your house. This person is supposed to get your car. Now that person has your car. This charity is supposed to get £1,000. There you go. So the executor has to deal with all that stuff and make sure that to the best of their ability, under the circumstances, your wishes are carried out. Same thing goes for your digital data. It's all well and good for you to say, I want this person to get my photos and this person to get my email, but somebody has to be in charge of actually doing that. Somebody has to be in charge of looking through your stuff and making sure that the right bits get to the right places. This person should be technically competent. This person should be able to convert file formats and log into online accounts and do password resets and be comfortable using different kinds of media, maybe different operating systems. If your regular executor is such a person, that's perfect. That's ideal. It's way less complicated then. If your regular executor does not have those technical skills, you're going to want to bring someone else in to do that, someone that you trust, of course, both personally and technically, and someone who is willing to work with your regular executor to make sure that all of the digital bits and all the physical bits get to their respective destinations. I also mentioned the problem with file formats. So what I just want to say here is I investigated what museum curators and historians and archivists had to say about digital file formats, because what I was looking for was, given the choice, what format is likely to survive the longest? What format is more likely than others to still be readable 50 or 100 years from now? And I got some opinions. There are opinions about video files and audio files and photographs and text documents and so forth. And I've put those suggestions in my book. Now, you have to take these with a grain of salt to some extent. What the experts say, for example, with images is, if you want the best shot at longevity, it should be a file format that is not proprietary, so not owned by one specific company, and also does not use compression, because compression can get you into various sorts of problems when you're talking about the distant future. So for images, they recommend non-compressed TIFF. Now, non-compressed TIFF is great. It's fine. It's very accurate. It has a lot of longevity. Unfortunately, uncompressed TIFFs are a bajillion times larger than JPEGs and PNGs and other such files that we know and love. If you decide that that's really what you want to do with all of your photographs, you better start investing in some large external hard drives. So you could also say, well, that's too much. I can't deal with that. I'm going to leave them all in JPEG format, but I'm going to leave instructions for my heirs to, look in on those files every 10 years and see if they might need to be converted to some other more modern format while the technology still exists. Speaking of photographs, in addition to all of the photos you've taken with your iPhone and iPad and other digital cameras over the last 20 or however many years, you may have a box like this. I do. Well, it's not a box, it's actually an envelope, but still, there are a lot of old photographs that I had from before the digital days, photographs that I took, and as well as photographs that I inherited from my parents. Some of the stuff was inherited from their parents. So I have some very, very old photos, and not just photos either. I have my father's high school report cards. He did not do well in French. He doesn't, well, he died in 2007, but he never knew that I knew that he did not do well in high school French. Anyway, I have, old tickets and, programs from whatever plays and concerts and other documents of historical interest to me. So my feeling is that as long as you're organizing your digital stuff, and you're doing this for posterity, remember, you're doing this to preserve it, it's a really good idea to digitize any of that stuff that is not already in digital form. Now, I'm not saying that you should discard the originals. Far from it. You should preserve them as well as you can. But we all know that over time, photographs fade, they become brittle, they can be damaged by, fire, flood, whatever, any kind of disaster. So it's a backup of a sort to also digitize these things. It's also going to make all this information a lot easier to find for future generations. They don't have to go digging through boxes and albums. They can just look it up on a computer. So the first step is to prioritize. I have a friend who was designated the family archivist. And his entire extended family all brought all of their old photographs to him. I saw he has a room in his house with a big wall, and the wall is covered floor to ceiling with these gigantic plastic bins, and every bin is full of photographs. I mean, tens and tens of thousands of photographs that were contributed by many relatives. His job was to scan each and every one of them. And what he does is every year at Christmas, he sends out everybody in the family a DVD with all of the photographs he has scanned that year. He has been doing this project for, I forget how long, something on the order of 10 years now with no end in sight. Obviously, he has had a powerful need to prioritize what happens because it's a big, big job. Probably your job won't be so big. Maybe you have thousands of photographs, maybe you have hundreds, but you will want to decide if I run out of time or I get bored or whatever happens, what order should I do these things in? What is the most important for me to do first, and how should I sort them? Now, if you have a scanner or are willing to go buy a scanner, you can certainly do this yourself. Depending on what sort of scanner you get and what sort of software you use and how picky you are about the quality, scanning documents yourself can be quite time consuming. Now, for some people, it's a fun, relaxing thing. Oh, I press the button and it's okay that it takes 2 minutes for the lines to slowly get on my screen as I see this document with its high resolution scan. I just spend that time in my Zen state appreciating this old photograph. Let's de-skew it and let's apply some color correction. And some people really love that. For other people, that's way too irritating. You don't have the scanner, or you don't have the time, or you don't have the interest. In that case, you can outsource it. Now, if you have a son, daughter, grandchild, niece, nephew, neighbor who can be, bribed with cookies, let's say, biscuits, then great. Rope a relative or a friend, neighbor into do the scanning for you. That's terrific. If you have no one that is so inclined or no one you can trust, there are lots of companies that you can go to that will say, hey, send us a box of photographs. We'll scan them all professionally. We'll charge you however much per image. If you want us to apply some retouching, image enhancement of various sorts, we'll be happy to charge you extra for that too. And then we'll let you download them online or send you a DVD or whatever. So that's up to you. Whether you do the scanning yourself or you hire somebody to do it for you, or you bribe somebody to do it for you, you're going to have this problem of what you name things. And one of the things that holds back a lot of people from getting very far in a scanning process is it's just so tedious to come up with names and categories for all these photographs. So I asked my friend who had all the tens of thousands of family photos how he went about naming them and organizing them. Now, this guy is a computer programmer. I figured he'd have some wacky thing with a, relational database and fancy software. And he's like, no, 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 no. We went low tech. So here's what my friend did and what he recommends. All right, you pop your photo in the scanner, press a button, it's going to come out. It's going to give it an automatic name. A lot of them will be like the date, the time, -1 dot PDF. So whatever name your scanner gives the file, your scanner software gives it, that's fine. Just copy that, paste it into a plain text file. Plain text. Okay. Pop in the name, press tab. Now just write a sentence about what you see in the photograph. Oh, well, that's Aunt Ethel in Florida in 1972 in front of her, white Pontiac. Okay, whatever. Just if you see a person in the photograph and you know their name, yeah, write that down. If you know where the photo was taken, you write the location. If you know the date, you write that down. Flip it over. Is there anything in the back? Notes? Is there a photographer's stamp, a date? Put that in. You're not writing literature here. You're writing a sentence or so about what you see in the photograph. Press return, lather, rinse, repeat. Now, what's great about this low tech approach is you're sort of making a kind of database like thing, but it's in plain text. So no matter what happens with technology in the future, I guarantee you people will always be able to read and search plain text files. Somebody opens that file and they're like, I wonder if great granddad had any photographs of Aunt Ethel. Well, Command F, Aunt Ethel. Oh, well, there she is in photograph 2021-02-24- blah, 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 blah. And then they can just go look up that image name. Now, of course, because you should be saving the originals too, while you're at it, while you're in the scanning process, what I suggest that you do is every so often, every 10, 15, 20 photographs, you say, all right, well, I'm going to call this, file A, just give it a name, number, whatever. Get a nice glassine envelope, something that will protect the photo, put that batch in there, put that in a nice, safe, secure box someplace, and then put a little label over that batch of things in the text file that says, well, this is in file A. That way, if someone wants to find the original paper version of this, they can do that as well. I've heard stories about people that go and scan a bunch of stuff and then just put the originals in a box on the curb for recycling. And I mean, I really wish you wouldn't do that. You can, but the real thing is going to have some attributes that the digital copies won't. It's going to have a smell. It's going to have a feel. Probably it's going to have high resolution. And having that actual artifact is, being able to hold something in my hand that my grandfather made that has a picture of my grandmother in it, that's meaningful to me. So I recommend trying to preserve the originals if at all possible. So, passwords. I have written a few books on passwords. I may have mentioned them once or twice already today. I want to say a few more things about passwords. I've got over 1,000 unique passwords for all kinds of accounts, all kinds of websites. And you could put a gun to my head. I could not tell you what 990 some of them are. I couldn't even tell you how many characters are in them. I really don't know, because anytime I go to a news site that says, come up with a password, I ask my manager, my password manager, to please make one for me. It comes up with a random password, it fills it in, it remembers it. I rarely even glance at these. I don't know what they are. I ask for long, random passwords that would be very, very difficult for a computer to guess. And I ask that for security reasons, to give my accounts the maximum possible protection. As I said, this makes it far less likely that my accounts will be hacked into. And the fact that they're all different means that if somebody discovers through whatever means, the password to one of my accounts, that they'll only have access to that one account, not to all of them. So this is what I recommend, and I hope that everybody does this. If you do not already use a password manager to create and store and automatically fill in your passwords, please do that. It's a kindness to yourself. It will make your life so much easier. It is so much less work for me to do that than for me to type in a password. So to say nothing of the process of actually remembering them, it will make you more secure, and it will help you automate things that would otherwise be irritating manual steps. Now, I'm saying this today, not just on general principles, but because your heirs, your digital executor, and anybody else in the future who is going to want access to your Mac's encrypted stuff, your encrypted files, your email account, your social media, your online backups, they're going to need your passwords. And it is far easier to say, well, here's my password vault. It's just a file. And here's the password to that vault. You have the password, you get access to all the other stuff in it. So it's a convenience feature, not only for you now, but also for your digital executor. Now, if you have 1,000 different accounts like I do, again, you don't want somebody to have to sift through every single one of them and figure out which ones are most important or which ones they should actually care about. So your password manager, I happen to use 1Password. I like it very much, but if you use LastPass, maybe a few people are less inclined to use LastPass after last week's little announcement, but whatever. If you use LastPass or Dashlane or RoboForm or any of a zillion others, some of them have categories, folders, tags, internal, organizational tools. If not, hey, just make a list. Just say, of those 1,000, honestly, it's these ones here that you need to care about. So in order to give your digital executor access, as I say, one option is, well, you stick the file, the vault that contains all those passwords on some sort of storage medium. We'll talk about that in a moment. Make sure your digital executor has that thing and also the password. So that's the easy, low-tech way to do it. Now, some of these password managers, including both LastPass and Dashlane, have a sort of emergency contact feature. And without getting into the whole process of details, basically it's a mechanism that you set up in advance that says, if anything should happen to me, make sure this person can get access to my passwords, but only if something happens to me. So there's a whole process that you can go through for that person to basically prove that you're dead or incapacitated, so that they can be granted access to your passwords. So if you want to use one of those, that's fine too. One way or another, make sure that person can access your passwords. Email is a pretty big, important category to me. Now, I am aware that different people deal with email in different ways. There are people, you may know someone of this sort, who will receive an email message, read it, and then just delete it. And emails stick around in their account only as long as it takes to either reply to it or just be aware of its contents, and then it disappears into the ether forever. There are also people who save everything, every last receipt, password, reset message, welcome to new account message, all of those things. And there's everything in between. I do know people who have tens of thousands of messages in their inbox. This is a practice that I do not endorse. I have rather strong negative feelings about that way of dealing with email, but I know some people who claim it works for them. Okay. I know other people who are very much in favor of an inbox zero approach, which means that as soon as possible after getting a message, we file it someplace. We do what has to be done with it, but then we get it someplace out of the inbox. Whatever your approach is, if it is not one of that original, if you do anything with your email other than just delete everything once it's processed, you are going to want to leave instructions for how that should be handled. Now, I like keeping old email, even though there is a pretty low signal to noise ratio. I like keeping old email because every once in a while, I need to say, okay, that trip we took to Italy in, was it 1999 or 2000? When exactly was that? Did we go to this city or that city? Well, I can look it up in my email because I've got itineraries there. I've got receipts from plane tickets. When did I buy that thing? Might that thing still be under warranty? No problem, I can check. I've got the receipt. So I like being able to go back and check where I was, what I was doing, when did I acquire a certain thing, when did I had this high school classmate. They wrote to me, what was it, 10, 15 years ago? When was that? Might I be able to get back in touch with them? So all that stuff and much, much more is in my email. I find it interesting to keep that. And I imagine that inevitably, when somebody is writing the definitive biography of Joe Kissel 50 years ago, that great icon of ebooks about death, they're going to want to know that stuff. Okay, so it's in there. I'm going to make some suggestions about how you should deal with your email. First step, make sure that you have on your computer, iPad, or other locally stored device a copy of all your email messages. Now, for most of us I'm going to say generously, our generation, I'm in my mid-50s. I think some of you are maybe have a couple of decades on me, maybe a few are a bit younger. My generation, email was a thing where I have an app on my computer. We didn't call them apps, we called them programs. I have an email client, a program, and it connects to a server and it downloads messages. So of course I have a copy of the message on my computer. Now, kids these days, I've got some friends who are a couple of decades younger than me. And for them, email, their entire lives, email has been a thing that has only ever happened in a web browser. They absolutely do not see the point of the existence of an app like Apple Mail or Outlook or Thunderbird or any of those. They're like, well, just go to Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo. I have a browser that I always have open anyway, and I've got webmail, and everything is just there. Why would I do anything else? All right. Now I have some judgments, but I'm not going to get into that. All I'm saying is that for the purpose of preserving stuff for the future, you need to have a local copy, because you can't guarantee that all those email messages that are stored in the cloud are still going to be in the cloud 20 years after you die. Sooner or later, Google or Microsoft or whoever is going to really, that person hasn't accessed their account in 20 years. Also, nobody's paying for it. I think they're dead. How about if we just go ahead and delete that? So the cloud is not a safe place to keep your email long term. We'll be talking more about the cloud very shortly. So if you want to preserve it, it's a good idea to have a local copy of it. You can download it into the email client of your choice. Of course, you're going to want to give your digital executor access. And I'm not just talking about the emails themselves, although that is true. In this case, I'm talking about your accounts. You want to make sure your digital executor has your username and your password and all the other login information they need for each one of your email accounts, because you're going to keep getting email even after you're dead. People and companies will not know that you're dead. They're going to keep sending you stuff. Some of it is going to be important for other people to know. Some of it could involve, money coming your way or money that you owed. Some of it could involve like long lost friend asking for information, whatever. So you might decide, well, I would like my digital executor to set up an out of the office permanently message. And this is what I'd like it to say, and I'd like it to run for 6 months or a year. You might decide that you want your digital executor to manually write to everybody in your address book and tell them that you're gone. You might want to say, you know, this particular account, honestly, just shut it down and nobody cares. So what you do with it is up to you, but you will want to leave your instructions for your digital executor about what to do with your email accounts. Now, in the future, of course, those archive messages, you might want to save them all for future generations. You might want to save only some of them for future generations. You might want to say, well, I want to make sure that my wife gets these and my kids get these and that nobody gets those. Again, if you feel that it is the right thing at some point to shut down those accounts, make a note of that. Again, as a reminder, all these things we're talking about, they're not just decisions you make. Yes, you have to make the decisions, but these are all things that you are going to record your wishes in your digital will. That's the point. We're compiling this document. And at the same time that we're compiling this document that lists all the different stuff and all the stuff we want to have done to those things, we are also saying, okay, well, that's the thing I'm going to have to put in my digital archive, and that, and that, and that, which we'll be building very soon. Now we come to social media. I am not a big social media person. I have a Facebook account, but my feelings about Facebook could most charitably be described as rather negative. I don't like Facebook at all, and I could give you a whole hour-long presentation on why that is. Maybe someday I will write a book like Take Control of Getting Off Facebook. That's a real possibility. Anyway, I don't like Facebook, but I know some people that do, including my mom. My mom is in her mid-80s and she is on Facebook all the time. I do have a Twitter account. I don't use it a whole lot. I'm not an avid Twitter user. I do a lot more reading than I do writing on Twitter. But I'm at least more active there than on Facebook. My mom, on the other hand, doesn't use Twitter at all. Now, whatever your involvement is with social media, this is the time to reflect on that. Which social media accounts do I use? Where have I posted stuff that I might care about preserving for the future? And for things that I don't want to preserve, what should happen to them? So make a little list. Well, I do have this Facebook account, but I hardly use it. You can do whatever you want to it. I have this Twitter account. This is what I like to have done with it. I have an Instagram account that I've literally never posted to. You write down whatever it is that you have. So what are the instructions you can leave for various social media accounts? You might say, okay, digital executor, when I am gone, I would like you to log into my Facebook account, my Twitter account, my whatever, one last time, and please leave this following statement. It can be your lovely words of wisdom or your parting shot or whatever. You might say, I don't really know what to say, but just like log in and tell people I'm dead so they don't keep trying to at me. Whatever, you can decide what you want that to say. Most of these services will allow you to log in and download a big archive of everything you've ever posted, all of your photographs, all of your text, all of your everything. You can download that. If that stuff is interesting and important to you, great, download it, add it to your archive. Some of them will also let you archive stuff online. Now, Facebook is an example. There is a way that you can set it up in advance so that when you are dead, your account is sort of locked. People can still read stuff in it, but you can't obviously add to it. Nobody's going to add to it. They can post like condolences or memories, but it's marked as, you know, this person is deceased, and the data is preserved online. Now, there's no guarantee that Facebook will preserve all of your stuff for 100 years, but that option does exist right now. You might decide, you know, really, I don't care, and nobody else should care about what I posted on Twitter. Or honestly, I'm maybe not proud of what I posted on Twitter, and I'd rather just have that nuked. Now, I had this saying. I came up with this saying when I was writing my book about online privacy. And the saying is, what happens on the internet stays on the internet. It is, in fact, very difficult to guarantee that any particular type of data has been expunged completely from the internet. You can't ever know. If something was exposed to the internet, there might be a backup somewhere. Someone might have screenshotted it. Someone might have downloaded a copy. You don't know that it's gone forever. But you can certainly ask for your digital executor to delete your account. If you run the social media account for a group, a user group, a club, a bird watching club, a sports team, a religious organization, whatever, you might want to leave instructions for someone else to take that over. They'll need your username and password and anything else, but you might want to hand that off to somebody else. Again, this is all stuff you detail in your digital will. Now, we come to the big, important, miscellaneous other category. What about all that stuff? Well, media, which in this case I'm specifically referring to things like TV shows and films and music and stuff that you've bought. A friend of mine, her husband was terminally ill a couple of years ago. We knew that he was going to die. And before he died, she wrote to me and she said, my husband has a gigantic collection of movies and TV shows that he bought from iTunes. So can I assume that once he's dead, I will get access to those? And I was like, kind of, sort of, maybe not really. The thing is, with that sort of stuff, Apple more licenses it to you than sells it to you. When you go to play, let's say I've purchased a movie, okay, and now, of course, I can watch that on my Mac, iPad, Apple TV, but it has to be a device that is logged in to my iCloud account with my username and password. Now, presumably, if somebody else who is not me, my wife, kids, whatever, had that username and password, they could still log in and they could still authorize that and be able to watch it or listen to it. But if Apple at some point realizes that I'm dead, they could shut down my account. And there is no guarantee whatsoever that I would be able to pass that authorization to view that stuff to somebody else. Now, I have been told that there exist occult methods for removing digital rights management, for defeating copy protection. Obviously, as an upstanding citizen, I would never recommend doing such a thing, nor would I provide instructions for doing so. I will merely comment that if one were to type a few words into their favorite search engine, the results might show up, and what a person did with those would be entirely up to them. Point is, though, you want to think about that stuff if it's important to you to pass on. Same is true of software. You might be able to simply assign your license key for something to somebody else. You might not, but you'll want to think that through. Now, do you have an iCloud account, a Dropbox account, a Backblaze account, Microsoft, whatever they're calling, they keep changing the name, Microsoft 365 account, Google Drive account? Do you have any sort of online, storage of documents, photographs, backups, anything? Make a note of those and what you want to have happen to them. Hint, that note should include, please suck all this stuff down out of the cloud and make a local copy of it, because again, you can't guarantee what's going to happen with the cloud in the future. Same is true for any external hard drives you have or other storage media that you have locally. And of course, your backups in one sense are a little bit less necessary in the future since you won't be actively adding to your data, but stuff can still go wrong with your primary storage after you're dead. So if you have backups, which you should, you want to explain what they are, where they are, how to access them, and what you want to have done with them. So you've done it. You've filled out your digital will, all of your inventory of stuff and what you want to have done with each thing. And you've said, all right, these are the files, the photographs, the videos, the everything that I want to preserve. Now, how do you actually go about doing that? Well, unfortunately, we have a little problem because all of the storage media that you can get today has one or more problems when it comes to long-term storage. I will mention these in a moment. I just want to say, because of these problems, you're probably going to want to choose more than one option to hedge your bets. So companies will say, well, we sell archival quality CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays. These are gold plated and they will never fade. They will never lose their data. They'll last for 100 years. That's great, although, I mean, those companies haven't been around for 100 years, so we'll see. But also in 100 years, will anybody be able to find a CD-ROM drive? Like, I don't know, I wouldn't really count on that. So that's a kind of iffy one for me. Obviously, hard drives, SSDs, we use these for primary storage, we use these for backups. They're great, they're high capacity, they're fast, they're relatively inexpensive. Unfortunately, they also deteriorate over time. Even if you put them in a dry, cool place free of magnetic fields, they can still lose data over time. Now, SSDs, of course, are far less susceptible to losing data from mechanical causes. However, the data in them can still degrade over time, especially if they aren't plugged in. With an SSD, you have to at least attach it to electricity from time to time to make sure it keeps preserving its bits. And a lot of people don't realize that, but it's true. Even if you do take it out of the safe once a year and plug it in for 5 minutes so it has some juice, there are still ways that over time it can lose data. So it's not a guarantee for the long term. Well, cloud storage, we've mentioned a few times. It's great because then somebody else gets to worry about the backups and replacing, drives that have worn out and stuff like that. So cloud storage is neat. But if you're talking about preserving, tens of gigabytes or much more of data in the cloud, sooner or later, somebody's going to have to pay for that. Are you really signing up your heirs to keep paying for cloud storage for the rest of their lives? If you're relying on free storage, boy, I'd be very skeptical that that will last for decades. And either way, it's not a guarantee for the long term. Of course, we know how to preserve paper, right? So there are books and manuscripts that are thousands of years old that are in museums, and they've managed to preserve paper that is very, very, very old. So if you wanted to print out all of your old emails and letters and things, you could take a lot of paper and a lot of toner. You can't really do that with video. You can't really do that with some types of media, but you could do that with some things. And that would be one way to preserve that data. Wouldn't be my first choice, but it might be a choice for a secondary storage. There's this company that claims to have solved the long-term storage problem definitively. They make these sapphire disks called nanoforms. They come in various sizes from, I guess, an inch or two up to 8 inches, I think. I don't know, but various different sizes. They take a sapphire wafer. They use a very, very high resolution laser to basically etch stuff onto it. So it's like kind of almost the idea of a laser printer, only instead of printing on a, applying a charge to a drum so that it picks up toner and puts toner on paper. Instead, they're just directly etching into this sapphire. Then they fuse another sapphire disc on top of that, and this resulting thing is waterproof, fireproof, impervious to magnetic fields. It's tough. It's hard to break or scratch. The company claims you can even drop it in lava and it'll still be okay. That's great. Now, on the downside, these things are quite expensive. Like, we're talking over €1,000 for one of them. If you lose it, well, then you're out of luck. It's great that they're sort of future-proof in the sense that you don't need to put this in a computer to read it. To read it, you just use a magnifying glass, because all it's done is just, etch things really, really small. So it's not a technological issue, but as with paper, you can't really put videos and stuff on it because it's not a digital format. So what I'm saying is none of these alone is a perfect solution. You're probably going to want to choose more than one of them. And I'll say a few more words about that in just a second. So you take all those files that you have specified in your will, in the inventory, and you copy them to the media of your choice, hopefully media plural. You'll obviously want to store that safely, cool, dry place, maybe a safe deposit box, maybe somewhere else. And you're going to want to store more than one copy, preferably in different places. Now, here's a little tip for you. In order to, this is, by the way, in addition to having multiple copies of stuff, not instead of, but this is extra insurance for you. If you have a son, daughter, grandchild, whatever, offspring, you can get them to do you a favor. You have to approach it in the right way, okay? So what I recommend is pulling them aside and saying, you have to use these words. Say, how much do you love me? It's very important that you start out that way, because then you know from the outset that they're trapped. They can't say, well, Grandma, actually, I don't love you enough to do whatever the small favor is you're about to ask me. No, nobody's going to do that. So you have to say, basically, do you love me enough to do me a medium-sized favor? And the favor you're going to ask is to donate a little corner of your computer's storage, your computer's hard drive or SSD. So you've figured out your whole archive comes up to 50 gigabytes or something. So you say, okay, could I store a copy of my archive on your computer? Just, you don't have to touch it. You don't have to do anything to it. Just leave it there on your computer in some little folder out of the way. But the point is, if it's on your computer, then as you back up your computer, that stuff is going to get backed up too. As you move from one computer or iPad or whatever to the next one, all that stuff is going to come with it. That means your data is kept alive. And because it is kept alive and being backed up and migrated in multiple ways, it has an extra shot at longevity. Of course, you're going to want to ask your person to do that for future generations as well. Assuming you remain alive for a while, and I hope you do, from time to time, you're going to want to go back in and refresh your archives with new photographs and emails and documents and things. Maybe you make some decisions that you want to actually delete some stuff from your archives, but you do want to keep up with that. And after 5 years, 10 years, you might decide, well, I've seen how technology has changed. I think maybe it would be a good idea to move this onto a different sort of media now. Do make sure that in your regular will, you leave your computer, iPad, and other physical technology to other people, because even though you have this separate standalone archive, the computer itself is going to probably be the easiest and most convenient way for somebody else to access your data. So you have chosen your media, you've put your stuff on it, you've created your digital will. Now I want you to actually make a thing, like a physical dossier, like a folder, an envelope, a box, something that's going to hold the following items: your conventional will, maybe not the only copy, but a copy of it, your digital will that you have printed out. Again, those might, depending on legalities in your area, be incorporated into the same document. Instructions. So what are these different items and what do you do with them? Your data archive itself, the physical media. I think I call how to be me. So the idea here is, if there are any things that you personally do in terms of maintaining your home or business or family affairs that you know how to do and nobody else knows how to do, whether it's, I have to clean out the gutters every March because if I don't, then, or I have to do this thing with the furnace or this thing with the car every so often, whatever it may be, write down the instructions for how to do those things. And this is an example of one of those things that if you decide to travel for a month, if you're ill and just unable to do these things for a month, having those instructions about how to do those day-to-day or month-to-month or year-to-year things written down, and somebody can just say, oh, this is what I have to do, that will save a lot of grief. Last but not least, I would like to recommend that you write your own obituary. If you write your own obituary, it's called an autobituary, like autobiography plus obituary. You can go online and find examples of this where people have written their own obituaries. On the whole, they're hilarious. they're funny, but they're also heartwarming. And they're way more useful and interesting than most obituaries. I have had 2 aunts pass away in the last month. I read their obituaries just as I have read the obituaries of everyone else in my family who has died. And I'm like, I don't recognize that person. Like, yeah, the names are correct. And I know that they lived in this city and I know that they had, left these survivors, but the other stuff is not, for me, in any way a reflection of who this person was or what they cared about, what was important to them, or what they were like. It's just all boilerplate stuff. And it's almost always that way because in the days following your death, your survivors are going to be under a lot of time pressure to get this obituary written in a hurry and get it published in the newspaper or wherever you put it. And the funeral director or whoever is just going to say, well, just fill in these blanks. And so it's going to be details that few people care about. If you want other people to know what was really important to you or what you were really like, write it yourself and just say, yeah, fill in the blanks with the date of death and the cause of death when the time comes. But otherwise, this is what I want to have published. So this has been, although it's taken us almost an hour and a half, the briefest skimming of the top layer of snow on the iceberg that is preparing your digital legacy. I really hope that you will buy the book and learn all the rest of this, and you'll actually follow those steps. Of course, while you're on our site, I would love for you to buy lots of other books. We have books on all kinds of topics, many of them specifically related to Apple gear. Some of them are a little more generic and relate to Windows and Android and so forth. But there will certainly be a lot of useful stuff there that you will like. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask if there are any questions. If you have a question, be sure to unmute yourself.
Joe, I noticed that Melissa Davis, Melissa, are you with us still? I'm sure you are. Yes, hello.
Hello.
That last question of yours about family sharing, would you just like to hurl that at Joe, just in case he knows the answer?
Sure. Can you hear me, Joe?
Yes, hi.
Hi. So I had a question about, I think maybe you might have some experience with this, Apple's family sharing.
Yeah.
We use it a lot in our family. Do you know, I've been researching this over the years and I never seem to find a really good answer. Is there a way, is there some special Vulcan grip we have to do to transfer the family organizer role. So say, you know, in our family, for example, it's my husband. Now, of course, I know how to work with it. I'm the digital executor of the family. He's the family organizer, only because this was way before the time when we were sharing an Apple ID and we decided to make it his. So, you know, you can kind of follow that. But
Yeah.
if ever something would happen to him and I would want to transfer the role to me, is there a way to do that we know of yet? Or do I have to go through the whole steps like a cave person and leave the family and create a whole new family and risk maybe losing, you know, stuff?
That is an question to which I do not know the answer offhand, although I know how to find out the answer.
Okay.
I'm going to consult my sources. Actually,
That'd be wonderful.
in a couple of weeks, on I want to say March 6th, I'm doing a class on iCloud for the Naples group, and some of you might have already signed up for that. And I will be talking about family sharing for that class. That particular detail is just one that has never come up for me before. But I will certainly figure it out before then. And if I forget to let you know personally, you can send me email or ping me on Twitter or whatever. And once I have learned the answer to that, I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a fascinating topic. And then while I have you, one other question, and it's okay if you don't know the answer to this either, but something to be thinking about. This is all near and dear to my heart. I gave a presentation about this subject. It's something that I study. I'm becoming involuntarily and voluntarily the digital executor for family members, now some of my clients. What kind of lawyer would you hire? Who would you ask to find out legalities of this? This is all like new stuff. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot on the books about it. You know, it's one thing to be responsible for your own digital legacy, but what happens when you are the digital executor? Now you're responsible for your own and everybody else's digital legacy on top of that all. And, you know, I don't mind doing it. I find a lot of value, and I love helping people. It's my jam, but I just worry sometimes about the legalities of it. And I know this isn't legal advice, but like who would you who would you speak to? What kind of lawyer is that?
I would start with the same type of lawyer who might have helped you with your will, somebody who does estate planning.
Okay, an estate
that would be
planning
where
lawyer.
I start, because that is the broad category under which this falls. Now, having said that, this is a specific sub aspect of estate planning that also involves intellectual property. Now, usually intellectual property is something that is dealt with on a corporate level. You know, somebody has an invention, a process, a patent or something, and then some other company has a disagreement about that. But it could be the case that that this crosses from, because we're not talking about money, we're not talking about atoms, we're talking about bits here. So it could be that some of the issues cross over into intellectual property, and maybe your estate planning lawyer would need to consult with somebody else or suggest that you do. But I think that the place to start would be estate planning, and you would just want them to tell you, like, just say, all right, I'm going to explain the issues to you, and when I get to something that is outside of your wheelhouse, you tell me where I need to seek outside counsel.
Yeah, it's one thing about insuring yourself if someone comes to your house and trips and breaks their ankle, but it's another thing when you're, you know, holding on to data and stuff, even though they begged you to, you know. So,
right. I mean, certainly I endorse the idea of talking to a lawyer about this, but I think that estate planning is the place to begin.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
Sure thing.
Appreciate the
Thank you very
talk.
much, Joe. Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. It's Mitch. I wanted to make
Hello,
a comment on the main person who is the creator of the family sharing, because I just had about an hour discussion with Apple on this today, And they assured me that I could not change my email. If I did, I would lose all my purchases. I would lose all my history because what I have an iMac account that I use for iCloud, and then I have a Gmail account that we use for all of our purchases, and that's the one I use for Family Share. And they said the problem in changing that to the iMac is that you will lose all your purchase history and everything that's associated with that Gmail, which I've used for years and years and years. And they were indicating to me that there's no way to do that. And so I'm thinking, based on what they told me, if I die tomorrow, I'm going to tell my wife, your new email is going to be mbriers@gmail, and just keep it all. And so I'd be interested in what you come up with, and I am from the Naples group, so be interested to see what you come up with as a resolution to that.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of, we have a book on, we have Take Control of Your Apple ID, and Glenn Fleishman.
I got that book. I'm just about halfway through it.
He has researched a lot of issues, and there's been a real sore spot with Apple IDs for years and years and years, which is that if someone happens to have two Apple IDs, which I have a few, and you purchase something under one of them, you can't get it transferred to your own other Apple ID account, let alone if I purchased some stuff and my wife has purchased some stuff, and now we want to, you know, merge those, or we want to transfer. Well, like, Apple has never made that possible. So when it comes to purchases, it's messy and it's complicated. And a number of years ago, Apple made a claim that they were going to sort that out, and they never did. So it could turn out, once I've done my research, it could turn out that exactly what you've said is the best we can do. It's just like, well, you know, somebody else is going to have access to that email address and pretend that it's you. That might be the only answer. I don't know. I would like to think that either there is some more elegant way of doing it, or that Apple eventually comes up with one. But I will have to look into that to tell you definitively.
It is possible. I did do it one time for a couple who the husband had passed away, and it was the same deal. She didn't want to lose all of the access to his stuff. And it's only possible if the email address that you want to transfer it to isn't already registered in Apple's system, or if it is, if you can release it somehow. It is possible, but it's far from elegant, and it would really take a lot of mind bending to work it out. But I have done it. It depends on very specific circumstances, but there are ways to do it. You just have to link the emails, and then after so much time, you can actually change your Apple ID to that new email. So possible, but not easy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. Do we have any more questions?
Yes, Joe.
Yes.
Kevin Sears, Longmont, Colorado. I recently purchased this book and covered it as a high-level topic across 3 sessions here among our senior co-op here in Colorado. The one thing that I'm thinking about, because this is quite the overwhelming task, is I'm reminded as we moved here last year, we had to downsize tremendously from where we live in order to fit here in our smaller unit. Mm-hmm. And so the question comes up, what do our kids really want? And you find out really quickly, they do not want any of your old plates and cups and this and that. And that's what's filling up antique stores these days. Right. Is as the baby boomers age out and have to get rid of their stuff. And this is no different with our digital assets or assets that are not digitized yet. And so I wondered if you had maybe a scope or a boundary that you could put around that box for people?
The only thing I can really say about digital data is that, you know, unlike all those plates and antiques and things, it doesn't take up any physical space. So I mean, I've got a little SSD here that stores 2 terabytes. Certainly, anything that I would want to preserve, any digital data I would want to preserve for the future, could fit on this with loads of space left over. So I get that in a sense, the same thing applies to digital files. I guess what I would say about digital is your kids don't have to involve themselves with those files if they don't want to. They can just say, it's in this box that takes up 0 space. I'm just going to ignore that because someday, maybe in the future, I will actually want to look in that box, or maybe my kids or my grandkids will want to look in that box. The only thing it's doing is occupying space on some storage medium. Now, I gave that recommendation that you have your kids, integrate that data into their own so that it's kept alive and preserved. If that just bugs them, if it bugs them to donate however many gigabytes it takes, and again, I don't think we're talking, for most people, I don't think we're talking about multiple terabytes of data. I think for most people, we're talking about gigabytes to 10 gigabytes, tens of gigabytes, and it can be compressed too. It could literally be just one big file that's sitting there until it's needed. But if that offends your children's sensibilities or their desire to be free of clutter so much, you just not do that. Just say, well, then it's gonna be a flash drive someplace or an SSD, and it's gonna take up, 5 cubic centimeters of space. And you can give your poor old dad that much, can't you? I mean, you got to employ guilt to its best effect. It's about all I can recommend, I'm afraid. In terms of, like, if you're asking, like, should you put a storage limit, like I should be looking to make this archive 50 gigabytes and no more, or 10 gigabytes and no more, like, I can't really say that because everybody's situation is different. If you've got tons of video, then it just takes more space. If you've got tons of text, it takes very little space. But I will say that in the course of sorting through your stuff and figuring out what to put in your archive, that is part of what you are deciding, is how much is likely to be signal for my kids and how much is likely to be noise, and can I pare down that stuff that I'm preserving to be mostly signal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Jan Brownfoot, you have your hand in the air.
I do
Hello.
indeed. Thank you very much. Thanks, Joe. Fascinating, interesting, overwhelming, actually, in many respects as well. I have a very simple question. What do you do about domain names?
Yeah, that's, see, now I'm going to write that down too, because I don't cover that in my book, and I should. Maybe it'll appear in the next edition. I have a lot of domain names, and right now, some of them are set to auto renew on a credit card, and one day when that credit card number stops being valid, they will stop auto renewing. So the correct answer is that information on any domain names you own, where you have them registered and how much it costs to maintain them, and also what is dependent on them, like without this domain name, this website will not work. Without this domain name, this thing will not work. All that really should go in your digital will, and you should decide, like, honestly, I don't care if you keep this website alive. I don't care if you even keep this domain name alive, as long as all the data that was on this website is preserved. However, if you own a domain name that is used for your email, and you want to keep the email address alive for a period of time, obviously somebody is also going to have to take care of the care and feeding of that domain name. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I've written it down. That is something that should absolutely be listed for your digital executor to take care of.
And would the digital executor have to advise the company from whom you are buying the domain name? Because I've just moved mine from an American company to a British company.
Yeah.
And they're much easier to deal with than trying to deal with America from England.
Yeah.
So would that be an appropriate?
There is a process to transfer ownership of a domain name from one person or company to another. Now, going by the letter of the law, probably technically, the process should be that either you, before you die, or your heirs, on the basis of having all the necessary legal paperwork in hand, officially transfer ownership of the domain name to the next person in line.
Right.
Practically speaking, no one in the process of transferring ownership of domain name, which I've done many times, nobody is going to be asking for your identification. So as long as some person has access to your email account and your passwords and can initiate that transfer to someone else, it ought to work. Now, I'm gonna say there is like another element of this that I didn't touch on, which is two-factor authentication. So sometimes, and domain names are a good example,
Yeah.
You'll have not only the username and password, but also somebody's going to get a message on their phone, a code on their phone, or some other sort of code. If that is the case, you want to make sure you leave your phone to someone, make sure they don't turn off that account, that telephone number,
Right.
until all those sorts of things have been dealt with. I'm going to have to think through that a little bit more and see what I can advise about that in the next edition.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. I'm very conscious that we are hugely overrunning. Mitch, you have your hand in the air. Could we possibly make this the last question and let Joe get on with his day? It's very kind of you to stay with us, Joe. Thank you.
No worries.
Mitch? Hello, Mitch? Perhaps Mitch, I think he's left his Mac at the moment. So does anybody else have one final question? Brilliant. Joe, when we spoke about this presentation, I remember saying to you that we'd just been through the process of talking about this for the first time ever, but that was a couple of months ago. I've got pages of notes. So thank you so much. They're absolutely fascinating and most useful presentation. Thank you.
I'm very glad to have been with you. I thank you all for your kind attention. Of course, I really hope that none of us have to use this information for decades to come. But things happen like viruses, and it's always better to be prepared.
Brilliant. Folks, could